Okay, let's be real. Just because your video game character is the hero, it doesn't mean that they're perfect. Like regular human beings, they're prone to making mistakes and just, causing a lot of general mayhem with usually zero repercussions. But sometimes these small mishaps can lead to something far worse. A lasting negative outcome that not only haunts them, but also those around them. And that is how villains are made. So let's have a chat about them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game heroes who accidentally made their own villains. Number 10. Nick Ramos, Dead Rising 3. Now it seems like most of the boss fights in the Dead Rising series happen because the main characters act too nonchalant around disturbed killers and would rather wait around and aggravate them instead of taking them out while they're distracted, or instead of that, just walking away and letting them be, because I don't want to mess with whatever this is. However, there is only one Dead Rising protagonist that is directly responsible for turning one of their own friends into a crazed maniac, and that person is Nick Ramos from Dead Rising 3. You see, the psychopaths in Dead Rising 3 are based off of the 7 deadly sins, and envy is personified by Nick's number one fan, Kenny, who idolizes him so much that he decides to replicate what Nick does by dressing up as him and then kidnapping a woman to stage a rescue. When Nick comes to intervene, Kenny lashes out at him, believing that Nick considers himself to be better than him. And then you have to defeat the obsessed fan to make him come back to his senses. The fight and the preceding cutscene are a fun subversion of expectations, but you have to admit, Nick kind of had it coming, seeing how dismissive and somewhat patronizing he acted towards his friend. Number 9. Courier 6, Fallout New Vegas. Now, Fallout New Vegas is pretty open to the player coming up with their own backstory. Most of your character's past is left ambiguous on purpose so you can roleplay them however you like, except that is for the Lonesome Road DLC, where it's deliberately used to show how Courier 6 created the side quest villain, Ulysses. Throughout Lonesome Road, your character learns of how their one mistake completely ruined their life and led them down a path of revenge. According to him, his home at the Divide was completely destroyed after Courier 6 delivered a package that activated the nukes hidden in the area, and now his goal is to destroy your own home by dropping another nuke on the NCR. Of course, your character would have no idea what the package was for, and why would they, considering a good male person does not look inside their packages, but your mistake is ultimately what pushes Ulysses over the edge. You might want to deny their claim, or at least tell them that nuking yet another settlement won't solve anything, but you have to admit anyone would definitely be cranky if their community got bombed to oblivion, except they probably wouldn't talk about bears and bulls quite as much. Number 8. Jimmy Hopkins, Bully. The plot of Bully is a surprisingly subversive experience, considering it's all taking place in a relatively predictable setting of a high school. Jimmy's experience in Bullworth is filled with backstabbings, plot twists, and constant changes of allegiances. But the funny thing is that none of this would have ever happened if it wasn't for Jimmy himself. Gary, the supporting character turned main villain, owes his entire rise to power to Jimmy and his utter lack of care for the trouble that he's causing for a little extra cash. Although in the first act of the game, Jimmy acts angry and fed up with Gary's plans, he does follow each and every one to a T, secretly helping his two-faced friends gain power over the school's cliques and becoming the villain who ultimately betrays him and starts a huge riot in the game's finale. If Jimmy had a little more foresight or just been better at saying no, then Gary would remain forever an outcast with no means of pitting the cliques against one another. Well, maybe instead of teaching kids how to dissect frogs, Bullworth should actually be giving them courses in assertiveness. Number 7. Talan, Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Now, Talan from the Middle-earth series doesn't just let one character become his accidental villain, he has an entire game mechanic dedicated to cranking them out at random. Middle-earth: Shadow of War and its predecessor, Shadow of Mordor, comes with the so-called Nemesis system that allows Talan to turn any generic orc he fights into a reoccurring villain with a unique backstory, as well as abilities and a personal vendetta against the possessed ranger. There are several different ways that Talan can gain a new enemy, including losing to them or killing them in a particular fashion, but regardless of the technique, the return of the orc always comes with some sort of expansion on their character that builds them up into a bigger and stronger villain over time. The best part is that you never know which orc might become your greatest adversary, as even if you plan on creating your own nemesis, another orc you accidentally killed might just come back from the dead and steal the spotlight for themselves. With so many different types of nemesis around, Talan might just be one of the most hated character in his world, and that's saying something considering he's sharing it with the Big I over here. Number 6. Chell, Portal 2. Now, Chell, the protagonist of the Portal series, might be good at solving puzzles, but she's definitely not so great at choosing friends. Although GLaDOS is the unequivocal villain of the franchise, in the second game she's replaced by Chell's comedy sidekick Wheatley, and that's all down to you. After the silent heroine defeats GLaDOS, she helps Wheatley gain control of the entire facility in the hopes of escaping it, but in the process, she doesn't realize that little course field will get absolutely corrupted with power, and as Wheatley sends her up the escape elevator, his new position gets to his head, and he decides to keep Chell Chell around after all to run some experiments on her himself. The funny thing is that the main reason why Wheatley turns on her is because Chell is mute. When GLaDOS starts insulting his intelligence, Wheatley assumes that Chell thinks that he's stupid as well, taking her silence as agreeing with GLaDOS' words. The age-old curse of the silent protagonist, letting the NPCs around you decide what your utter lack of input means. Number 5. Mario. Paper Mario. You can't really deny that, at the end of the day, Mario is a bit of a menace in the Mushroom Kingdom. One moment you're just playing golf with him, and the next he just stomps on your head just for walking in a straight line. However, there is one game where Mario's misdeeds shine the brightest, and that is in the series' arts and crafts spin-off RPG, Paper Mario. In Paper Mario, there are plenty of wacky and comedic situations that Mario gets himself into, including an entire villain arc of an adorably small hatchling that Mario accidentally antagonizes, Junior Trooper. Early on, Mario makes an enemy out of Junior Trooper after he trespasses on the little guy's territory and humiliates him with a quick and easy victory. At this point, you don't think much about it, but as it turns out, Junior Trooper becomes so embarrassed by his defeat, he decides to chase you around the world, getting stronger and challenging you to harder and harder fights. The difficulty scale gets so ridiculous that Junior eventually becomes one of the toughest enemies in the game, and you only have yourself and your lack of care for respecting his private space to blame. Number 4. Hawk. Dragon Age 2. Hawk, the protagonist of Dragon Age 2, might be one of the most prominent characters in the entire franchise due to their involvement in a variety of different history-defining moments in their game. The champion of Kirkwall helps jumpstart the war between the Mages and Templars, drives away many different attackers, and they're also responsible for creating the series' major villain, Corypheus. During their dealing with the Grey Wardens, Hawk unwittingly releases the corrupt mage Corypheus from his seal, and even though they manage to defeat him on the spot, Corypheus doesn't turn out to be dead later down the line. He returns in Dragon Age Inquisition as the game's primary antagonist, leading an entire army in his search for the Black City. He becomes a major thorn in Hawk's side as they make a cameo in the game and have to sheepishly explain why they let him escape in the first place. Their failed attempt at killing Corypheus can even result in Hawk paying the ultimate price if you, spoiler alert here, let them sacrifice themselves in the Fade. Well, maybe next time don't mess with blood magic-fueled seals and everyone can go about their business as usual. Come on. Number 3. The Survivors. Until Dawn. Now, the cast of Until Dawn is based off of classic horror tropes, and that means that they share a lot of their more annoying quirks. On top of their constant need to prank each other or getting it on in the most murder-prone locations ever, there's also the utter lack of care for basic safety that inadvertently leads them to create the very monsters that hunt them down throughout the game. The Wendigos that chase the survivors in Blackwood are Hannah and Beth, the two sisters who die in the intro of the game after the gang pulls a mean prank on them and causes her to run off into the night, followed by her concerned twin. The two sisters fall off of a cliff, but one of them lives and ends up eating her siblings' flesh in order to survive starvation, turning them into a Wendigo. Now, this means that if the main cast just stayed put and didn't try to do cheap jump scare pranks all the time, they wouldn't have to deal with any of these monsters whatsoever. So you know what? This is well deserved. Number 2. Juliet. Lollipop Chainsaw. Although the plot of Lollipop Chainsaw can be summed up as high school cheerleader kills bad zombies with tool shed derived weaponry, there is actually a lot of lore going on in the background of this undead massacre, concerning itself on how the apocalypse started and why it's actually Juliet and her friends that have been indirectly responsible for it. Yes, according to Swan, the necromancer goth kid responsible for summoning the zombie outbreak, the reason why he dabbled with the dark forces was because the students around him kept bullying him. The constant humiliation pushed him to the edge, but the straw that broke the camel's back was the lack of support from Juliet, who he had a crush on and thought could be his only friend. Now, the slight nice guy narrative aside, it's pretty clear from the in-game cutscenes that Juliet could have helped Swan deal with his issues if she wasn't her airheaded self, too preoccupied with the day-to-day of her high school life to notice a struggling classmate. Then again, if Juliet did help Swan overcome his anger issues, the game would have had a lot less fun zombie decapitation action going on. And number 1, Travis Touchdown, No More Heroes. Travis Touchdown is the easygoing but rather crude protagonist of No More Heroes. His goal is to kill anything in his way and become the number 1 top-ranked assassin, which naturally is bound to make Travis a lot of enemies. However, if aspiration of mass assassinations wasn't bad enough, Travis also leaves a pretty terrible impression on strangers due to his airheaded and dismissive attitude towards the death that he causes. In fact, this lack of care is how Travis has created not one, but 2 major villains for himself. In the first game, the final opponent Travis faces is his half-sister Jean, who wants to watch her brother suffer after Travis spent his whole life absent-mindedly admiring his father, who secretly abused Jean behind his son's back. In the second game, the final boss, Jasper Bat Jr., seeks revenge on the assassin because he killed his father and 2 brothers in cold blood when Bat was just a child. When you think about it, Travis really has it coming for him, but then again, you probably don't care so long as he's still the funny goof of a protagonist that everyone knows and loves. Well, I say say loves, I mean tolerates. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 video game heroes who accidentally made their own villains. I hope you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on X, and it's at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Hope you're treating yourself well, my friend. Hope you're treating yourself with that love and respect, because you bloody well deserve it, alright? And do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise. You are a massive ledge. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.